Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Positive Success Show. I have a wonderful guest today. Her name is Rona Jobe, and she is a partner at Smart Settlements and also the founder of Level Up Strategies. I met Rona through the internet, just really looking at other entrepreneurs out there that have lived the international lifestyle and understand the challenges that people face when they transition from country to country, from job to job, or just transitioning in between careers. And so I wanted to bring Rona onto the show. Rona, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I think a lot of our listeners, have that challenge of how do you actually navigate transition? How do you, especially if you're in the international lifestyle? And so I would love to learn more about what you have done to do that, to transition successfully in between countries, in between, just in that in between.
Sure. Well, I work a lot with with frameworks and I try to really understand what am I getting into from a framework point of view, just so I can identify where I am, because that's kind of like my roadmap, right? So I remember when every time I would either start a new job or, we would move overseas or we would move back to the US, I kind of always go back to the that U curve, like I know like at 6 months in, my honeymoon phase is going to be over and I'm going to start feeling a certain way. And then at 1 year or 2 years in, I know I'll start to get comfortable. And I know that at that point, we will probably have to move again. Or at the 3 year mark, that's kind of my comfortable space. Like I just kind of try to keep in mind, like there is a flow to this. There is a there is a somewhat of a formula that I'm going to sort of be following in terms of how I'm feeling, in terms of what my experiences will be. And I just kind of try to navigate kind of my mindset as I'm going through those different points of that transition.
No, that's great, and I love your that visualization of the U curve. I'm like, I never thought about it that way, but that is totally how it feels when you are moving to a new country and trying to figure things out. And so, can you share with our listeners and our audience, what was that first move abroad like for you, and kind of how you thought about or approached your professional life?
Sure. So we moved to Brazil, was our very first post overseas, and we had, we'd known how long it was going to be, and we had prepared for it actually. Prior to moving to Brazil, I prepped, the current company that I was working with, and I had said, this is what's in the horizon. What is it going to look like? Is there a possibility of me working overseas, and how can we make that happen? A lot of what I was doing at the time was remote already, and like how can we kind of translate this into an overseas thing? It was difficult a little bit for for the kids, because they would have to start new schools, but I tried to mitigate a lot of kind of the negative experiences they will have, or even I will have, or my whole family will have, by trying to prep for it as much as I can, doing a lot of research for it. You can never really prepare for the unexpected, but for the things that you can expect, I try to prepare for it. Like, what are the different schooling options? Okay, in terms of a career, where will I be in a year or two, and what am I okay with that? So a lot of it is first kind of really getting yourself into accepting kind of what's happening, like worst case scenario, best case scenario, and then going from there with the prep. I have a ton of planning tools, like you name it, from like hacking to, and a lot of them are still saved, in a lot of various different spreadsheets. And I've even moved into different apps. What are we bringing every time? What's in the UAB? Like, what if we're going on R&R? Like, what are we bringing? Like, what are we preparing for? So it's definitely a lot of prep work. And I think the logistical prep actually helps me get into that mindset that like, okay, this is going to be difficult. We're trying to prep for it as much as we can. It may not go 100% perfectly well, but that's okay. So,
Mm-hmm. And that's no, that's amazing. Just all that preparation that you do, and I'm curious to hear, what do you, so when you say you're going through your process of understanding, like, okay, what is it going to be for my kids, for myself, et cetera, and then asking yourself, am I okay with that? So how do you know if you're okay with that or not before you do the actual move? Because I think that requires a high level of self-awareness, and it's like, how do you deal with ambiguity? Because it's a great question. And I wish I asked I asked that question to myself every time we moved, because I kind of just went full speed ahead and try to get anything that I could in terms of professional experience.
Yeah. Not that we didn't go full speed. I felt like we we went full speed. I mean, we had about we knew ahead of time, about a year ahead of time, that we were going to be leaving. We didn't know where. With the State Department, you never really know until they give you a green light. And I think we were 6 months out when we found out where we were going. But I do recall, at least for myself, I feel like with the kids stuff, it's so hazy now at this point. But I do know, for me personally and professionally, I kind of sat down and I was in a bit of a shock before we even left. And I said, there's a very, very high chance and high possibility that us moving will mean that my career at best will stagnate.
Mhm,
And am I okay with that?
mhm,
And I guess I just kind of made a calculated decision in my mind, going, okay, well, that's going to slow down, but what enrichment do my kids get out of this? What additional resiliency skills will they gain from this? What additional travel opportunities? I love to travel. And I think that's what pulls a lot of us into this lifestyle.
yeah.
And I asked myself, will this be worth it? Now, when it came to actually all of this coming to pass, um, to say that it was not difficult to reckon with, I would be lying. It was absolutely devastating to reckon with that reality. But you got to take it one day at a time. I mean, if I had known how difficult it would have been at the end of it, would I have done it ahead of time? I don't know.
Mhm, 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 mhm. No, I love this. I love this conversation. And for those that are listening or watching, Rona and I were both in this international U.S. diplomatic lifestyle. So moving every 2 to 3 years, so unsettled, not unsettled, but just constantly on the move. So this challenge of really adapting quickly to the fast changes and not knowing what's going to happen next. So Rona, in Brazil, how did you were you able to work remotely, or what did you end up doing there? And then we'll go into how did you transition back to the States?
Yeah. So I did work remotely in Brazil just about the whole time I was there.
Yeah.
I continued on with what I was doing. I was a management consultant, still am at heart in a lot of many different ways. um, and so that was something that I was able to bring with me overseas. And majority of the time that we were there, I was full time working remotely, which, for better or for worse, was great, because I felt like I was still able to have my hand or my foot into my own career, and at the same time experience the richness of the culture, the community that was there. Um, and we actually ended up having our third child while we were posted in Brazil, although we had come back to the US to have our third child. So I came back here and then they came back again. So it was like multiple kind of, there's mini moves and then large moves that had happened in between. At the very end of our time in Brazil, I did end up no longer working, just kind of gave up everything, because we were at a point where, we were 7 months out from moving back from, from Brazil to the US. Did I want to focus on bringing on additional clients and continuing to do this remotely while I had a 3-month old, and also then prepping my kids, for summer over there, and then also prepping us back to come back to the US. And so I made the decision to just kind of take a pause, sort of an extended maternity leave, which was kind of nice. And we found ourselves, towards the end of that year, traveling back and moving back to the US.
Awesome, awesome.
And we've been here since.
That's awesome. No, that's great. And so what do you do now? And how did you, like, when you made that transition back to DC, like how did you get into smart settlements and kind of just resettle back into the United States? Because I think a lot of folks that do go back to the States, it's hard to start up again, because it's like this start and stop, start and stop,
Yeah.
flow. And you've done you've done incredible for yourself in terms of what you do now. So can you share a little bit about how you approached that?
Well, thank you. For well, I'll start from like a personal perspective, and then I'll share some of the professional side of things. In terms of our family, at this point, we had kind of moved a few times, whether they were full on moves or like mini moves, for coming back and having the baby, and then back to Brazil, and then back again. So I think with our family, it was difficult, although it was a little easier, I guess, because everybody spoke the language. Everybody knew where things were. I mean, we were coming back to home essentially. DC is our home, or the DC metro area, I should say. And although it was still difficult in that, you didn't have, we were in a hotel for like 4 months. It was really difficult. We had our house, but we didn't have any furniture in the house. So here and there, we were kind of in between. The kids had changes in, who their friends were back then to who their friends were now. And so it was challenging, but I think for us, it was slightly easier because we already had a network here. We already had friends here. We already had families here that we knew and could trust. So I think it was a little bit easier on that side. Professionally, a lot of things were up in the air, and for me, it felt like a great opportunity to just see what else I'd like to get into besides what I already knew to do. So it's funny because I actually had interviewed for a couple positions while I was in Brazil coming back. So I did prep myself, to come back and eventually fully join the workforce again. So I started interviewing and applying while I was in Brazil. I came back. And then I did start with the job that I absolutely did not like and did not really last. It was a government contracting job. And so there was some travel involved. I wasn't really that into it because it had just taken so much time away from the family, especially during a transition period, and knowing that my husband was moving into another position that could potentially travel more. So, I mean, even though it is now back here in the US, I think it's still, still kind of just as many women would, many mothers would come across that issue of, what do I prioritize? Do I prioritize a family? Like, what about, your spouse's career? What about your children's school? What about their adjustment and all of these things? And so I ended up deciding that I wasn't super in love with that job to kind of, forego a lot of the things that I was missing at home. So I ended up actually looking for another position. In the meantime, as I was in Brazil, and while I was transitioning back, I always have like little side projects here and there just to kind of keep the brain going and keep the juices flowing. And I had started to help small businesses kind of get their businesses up and running. Like if it was a small, like 2 staff, business, to one that is completely starting up with not knowing what that design would look like and what that business structure would look like. So here and there, I would kind of advise small business friends and folks that I've been introduced to kind of how to design certain, either if it's marketing for their website or, what a structure of their, of their potential future contracts would look like. So at that point, I said, well, maybe, I should kind of start looking into this a little bit more. Let me start applying. And a friend of mine actually from here had introduced me to the owner of Smart Settlements, that they had met through a networking thing. And she knew that I was, my friend knew that I was looking. And so she kind of just connected us. It was completely serendipitous because it was so just by luck that we had met and we'd connected, and we talked about the challenges of a small business, how to actually apply some of the things that, a lot of the larger companies and agencies and organizations use management consultants for, and what it is that they do, and how can that be applied to small businesses. And so that kind of got the conversation started. I didn't know it then, but I was basically applying for a job. And I guess, as they would say, the rest is history.
I love that. I love the just I was writing notes as you were speaking. I'm like, oh, this is so good. Because to a certain extent, it's like you, which I love, it's that you were open to see what the opportunities were after deciding, this other kind of job was not for you. And was it really worth it,
Mhm.
in terms of that time exchange with your family? And so I think that is a huge consideration to make. And what I also love is, you were saying like, oh, we connected serendipitously. But at the same time, like coming from my perspective, when I'm listening to your story, I'm like, wow, no, I'm like, but you were putting it out there. Like you wanted to talk to small business owners, and then you met this person and you networked, and then everything happened. And so, I think it's such a great approach to this lifestyle, is being open, but then also pursuing something specific. And I think the fact that you're taking your skills from management consulting and applying it to a new space, super cool. I love it. It's like just being super creative.
I
With
think that the key word that like I know you and I have kind of talked about is openness.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like for those of us who do end up moving overseas, we have already, I don't know if it's innate in us, but we already have that openness to a degree. I just think when it comes to career or professional, personal development, maybe we might be a little bit more closed off because I think, as at least as women and as mothers, it's always sort of at least for me culturally, it's always been like, oh, put your family first, or it's their needs. Definitely that's how I grew up. It's what is it that the kids need? What is it that the kids want? How can you make their life, better than the previous generations and so forth, that a lot of us now just kind of forget to ask, what is it that I want? Like, what is it that I really like? What is it that really drives me? Do I stay with this job because, it's a decent job and it it may not be, what I truly want to do, but it's decent hours, it's decent pay. You kind of make these concessions that
Mhm.
you don't realize are kind of closing you off to potential other opportunities.
So good. Okay, everybody, listen to that question. What is it that you want? Like write that in your journals. That's a good question to ask yourself all the time, to make sure that you're aligned with where you're going in life. So you are a working mama with
Yeah.
3 kids. You have your job and you also have like your side stuff. How do you, Rona, how do you strategize? Like, what do you do to do it all? Because this is something that I struggle with. I have 3 kids as well. And I have this business that I have. I also have a spouse and about to move. I don't know where in the next 2 months. So a lot of things to juggle. And I'd love to know how you do what you do and still stay sane.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is, a lot of it is I don't know. I ask myself that every day too, but I will say that there has been a real, and I don't know if this is because of, the pandemic that has happened, and or if this is just kind of where we are in terms of, the seasons in life. We go through seasons, and I think in terms of the things that we're going after and the things that are important to us also are come with the season. Um, for me, I've always loved having a full plate. I feel like if I don't, I will find something to do to fill my time with whatever it is. I've never in my whole life been able to just kind of sit still.
Mhm.
Like you take me to the beach, I can't sit there and just sit still. I have to be doing something. So I think one, I don't know if it's something inside me that's just like, no, you can't, it's just, you can't sit still.
Mhm.
But in terms of, once in terms of like as a grown up, I guess I'm a grown up. When you've got folks, people relying on you, when you've got your spouse, you've got several moves, and then you've got clients relying on you, I think it becomes to be a very what is the word, precise dance in
Mm.
terms of where do you step, when do you step this way, when do you step that way. And sometimes you step a little closer towards your children's needs, sometimes you lean a little bit more towards what your clients needs and professional needs are. It just really varies, day to day. I have been incredibly fortunate, at least through so far in life to have, my spouse be incredibly supportive of what I do. Is he always 100% supportive? I mean, no, but is he supportive so much that I am able to do A, B, C, and D? Absolutely. And I think it's impossible to, to do this without the kind of support. I always ask myself sometimes, and when I look at these amazing, these amazing businessmen and businesswomen, and majority of the time, these entrepreneurs that you see on magazines, on social media, on the media, or everything, they're mostly men, right? And you ask, like, oh my gosh, how is it that they can be super successful? A lot of times is because they have a huge support system behind them. I have clients who do incredibly busy, and then they have a spouse who is stay at home. And I always remind them, I'm like, don't you forget, you're able to do what you are doing right now because you have someone making sure that the personal side of things is taken care of. So that's kind of one really big help. Another thing is I like to empower those around me to be autonomous, to be able to do things for themselves, especially at home. Like, if I had to do the dishes every single night, if I had to unload the dishes every single night, if I had to do the laundry every single night, I don't think I'd be here talking to you, Dom.
You'd be doing the dishes. Oh my gosh, no, that's
Yeah.
so true. That's so true. And in a prior conversation, you had like, because of your frameworks and your management hat was on, and you were saying like, yeah, Dom, I'm really good at leveraging time. I'm like, okay, tell me more about that. Like, yeah, I could scale myself. I'm like, oh, how do I do that? And you shared a specific framework. Can you share that with our audience?
Yeah. I love, like I mentioned, I love empowering those around me to do things for themselves. I don't feed my kids breakfast. They make breakfast on their own, and they know, like, we have a system in our pantry. They know where everything is. They know what to grab. And it's an example of a framework. Like, I teach you where to find things. I teach you how to grab things, and I teach you what to eat. And then we go through that kind of practice over and over until they can be, you know, self-sufficient.
Yeah.
In business and in personal life, you just really got to ask yourself, like, what is it that I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing? Because either others should be capable and autonomous in doing that, or maybe is there technology out there that can, that can help me do things? A lot of times the answer is yes, although I'll be honest, like, it's much easier to to automate and to delegate and to scale things at work than it is at home, just because children are children. So
No,
but I take a look, basically, like, what do I have around me? What is the um what is the highest value or the most impactful thing I can do with my time? I only have 24 hours in a day. Everybody has 24 hours in a day. And when you start looking at what is the most impactful thing that I can do with those 24 hours, you're able to define, okay, what is it that I need to start delegating and, imparting to others so that they too can not only help themselves, like help me help them,
Mhm.
but also it helps the whole kind of community, whether that's here at home or at work. It helps them become a little bit more autonomous and empowered to get to their next level. So
Awesome. I love it. No, I love it. That's like, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, even as a leader in a business or a leader in a family, like, how do you empower others and give them the tools and strategies to be independent, be independent, make their own empowered choices, and all of that. So that's awesome. Um, so Rona, when things get challenging, what do you do to stay positive?
ooh, what do I do to stay positive? I feel like it's hard sometimes, right? I'm a generally positive person, I think. So maybe I might have, a little advantage in that. But one thing I try to do when things get hard is I focus on the very next thing that I need to do. Um, and then try to look at the big picture. Try to lift yourself and go, okay, why am I doing this? Where is this going? It's really important to have that why. why are you doing this? Which is really important, why you should ask yourself what you want. Because if
Mhm.
you're doing things that doesn't align with what it is that you want, it's going to be hard to find that reason why you're doing it, or vice versa. So I think staying positive, I've had setbacks in life, just like many other people. I've always somehow managed to, to take lemons and turn them into lemonade. And I think in order to do that, you just have to, you know, put one foot in front of the other and
Yeah.
keep going. And if you need to, pause and, take a look around and see, is this something that I want to do? Although, you don't want to be rocking back and forth and trying to be indecisive about things. But I have found that just pausing and taking it day by day really, really helps.
Oh, love it. I love it. That's so great. That's so great. And final question, Rona, because our time is running out. What
Right.
is your definition of success?
My definition of success is, was my life well lived? Did I make an impact? And am I leaving a legacy? So not necessarily, it's not necessarily measured by dollars. It's not necessarily measured by your number of followers on Instagram or anything, but of the folks closest to me, did I provide them value? Did I give, did I have a positive impact in their life? Did I set my kids up for success in the future? So
Love it. Love it. Awesome, Rona.
my definition.
No, it's beautiful. And everyone's definition is a little bit different or but somehow similar. We're all trying to just live a good life, live our best life and make an impact. So thank you so much for being on the show. And how do our listeners, audience get in touch with you? What's the best way to get in contact?
Sure. I mean, if you're online, if you're on Instagram, you can find me at Smart Rona, SMART, and then my first name, RONA, all one word. Or you can find me also on LinkedIn. Just look for Rona Jobe, and I'm sure I'll pop up. There's not very many of us out there.
Awesome, awesome. And then definitely, if you are a small business owner and you are listening to this podcast or this show, make sure you reach out to her. She would love to connect with you as well. Thank you so much, Rona, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dom.